boy, am I excited for this. This book was good on so many levels. It just blew my mind, my expectations. I did not see, I had no idea where this book was going, and it took me to amazing places that I really, really enjoyed. It felt so good to be back in this world with these characters that I love, that I've grown to love, that I know that I've seen them develop and grow as human beings and as powerful beings, as kings and Grisha. It's just wow. There was just so much story to develop and lots of characters, lots of new characters that we got to meet, lots of old characters that we got to see again. I think that this book was a fantastic ending to a series, to a world that we have gotten to know. And I'm just so glad that this is the book that's ending the whole Grishaverse, at least for now. I'm gonna break up this video again in two parts, into the non-spoiler reviews and then the me just like kind of ranting spoilery stuff. So let's just get on with it. So Rule of Wolves picks up where King of Scars ended, like immediately afterwards, with the Darkling is back and there's a wedding that needs to be planned, and Nina has infiltrated Brum's household, his family, and there's this huge war with Fjerda, and there's this conflict with the Shuhan. I think I'm gonna start by explaining the plot with Nina because that's probably the easiest to go through. So she's a spy in Brum's household, so she's with Hannah, and she's like her maid or her tutor or something, or her friend in the household. And she's collecting information, passing it on to Nikolai, and she's trying to get to know the royal family and Brum's household and trying to see how much information she can actually get from them. She's also trying to dig up a lot of faith within the people. For Grisha and Saints, she's trying to like stir trouble. Just like any trouble for Brum, she's stirring that up. There's also her and Hannah's relationship, which is developing, and that's a really nice one to read about. I really enjoyed that. Nikolai's story is one of a lot of plotting, scheming, and ruling. His job is to find different ways to get money and get supplies and build a bunch of war machines and deal with politics and form alliances. So there's this huge ruling the kingdom aspect that we really get to focus in on with Nikolai. Then with Zoya, it's pretty much backing Nikolai up, and she goes on other side quests to support him in his role, but she's mostly with Nikolai the whole time. And then there's this other chapters which are from Mayu's perspective, and they take place mostly in the Shuhan, so in the south of Ravka, and they're dealing with the Taban royal family and other side plots with the Kurgud there, and trying to bring another ally for Ravka, or at least if not an ally, then one less enemy. They're trying to deal with that one problem that Ravka's been having for a while. Okay, so I'm going to be ranking this book in terms of writing style, plot, pacing, world building, and characters. And then after that, I'm going to give my overall rating, which I put on Goodreads, and just give my final thoughts on the book. For writing style, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think that Leigh Bardugo writes so well. She writes amazing characters, amazing plots. She just knows how to get through to the audience, how to portray these stories in such a really easy to read way. Like, I did not want to put the book down because it's so fluently written, and these characters are consistently written, and this world is consistently written, and I just love the service that she does to her characters, and the way she writes them is so friendly and easy to read for everyone. I will say one thing though, reading this book made me feel like I was watching a TV show. Like roughly every 3 chapters was a new episode, because like every 3 chapters you would have like the perspective from one of the 3 characters, like Nina and then Nikolai and then Mayu, or Nina, Zoya, and Mayu. So it kind of felt like 3 or 4 chapters was like an episode. Then you finish that and you finish the episode. So it's like new plot. And that was kind of a strange way of reading the book, because I'm used to reading a book as if it were a book. And this time I felt like I was reading a TV show, which was kind of weird. I mean, I kind of forgot what that was like because I recently just read Shadow and Bone in preparation for the Netflix show that's coming, because that one's just like all of that is from Alina's perspective, and so I wasn't prepared for this. I'd forgotten that she'd written her books like that, but it was fine. It was okay. It was a bit jarring at first, but after you get used to it, it's good. And plus, it keeps it interesting because you keep wanting to know what happened in like that other person's story, so you have to keep reading to find out what happened to them, and it's kind of like an endless loop of you want to know what's happening. Okay, so for the plot, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Mostly, I thought that it was so good. The whole thing was so interesting, and there was never a point in time when I was bored or the plot was slowing down or anything. It was just all together. All the issues that they were facing were interesting. All of the ways that they solved these issues were very interesting. So the plot was really good. The only issue I had with the plot is that I think there was too much of it. Like there was too many problems happening at the same time that they had to solve. And it felt so overwhelming to read because it was just so many things that they were juggling. And I think that in the end, they solved all these problems, but it felt like it was such trouble to read because it was too much. The pacing, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This one was perfect pacing, which is a huge contrast to the first book, which was, I think I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars rating. It was so poor before, but now it was amazing because each chapter was a different perspective and a different storyline. It's constantly something different, and with each edition of a chapter was something very important that was happening. So at each given moment, it was something important. So the pacing was done really well. Like it wasn't rushed, and it also wasn't lagging, because sometimes that happened, especially with the first book. There was a lot of lagging in the middle. For the world building, I also gave it 5 out of 5 stars because I was so excited to get back in this world, and I love the Grishaverse so much. All of the countries come together in such a perfect way in this book. Like we get contributions from Ravka, Shuhan, Fjerda, Kirk, and Novyi Zem. They all come together, and it's all very political, and we go to different countries. We visit Fjerda, Ravka, Shuhan, and Ketterdam. We go to Kirk. So I was so excited to go there again because we hadn't been there since Six of Crows, and it's just really good to see this payoff at the end of the show. I mean, at the end of the series, that it's all coming together, and it's really nice to see the countries interacting, because that's how a real world would be, right? It's not like an isolated country with an isolated problem. This is a world, and they all have their issues, and they all have to work together. We also got to explore the Shuhan country way more. We got to explore the characters, the queens, and a little bit of their politics, which was interesting because we had never gotten to see Shuhan before, only like really focused on Ravka and Fjerda. So there's more world building. I think the only country we haven't really seen is like Novoy Zem, and I hope that one day she can touch up on that country again, because we haven't really gotten to see that much of it, and that's like the one country that's lacking. Okay, so for the characters, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because some of them felt off. I felt like reading some of those characters was just different to how they normally feel when I read them. especially Nikolai and Zoya. Like I said before, I'm not a huge fan of their relationship, and I think that really puts me off a little bit because I just don't think it's right or natural for them to be together. So that's like one thing that's really been pushing me down, especially with these characters. There's a lot of good character development, and there's a lot of character development, especially for Nina and Hannah. Both of them grow so much when they're in the capital Fierda, and there's a lot of character development for Zoya as well. She's dealing with a lot of internal struggles and dealing with her newfound power. I personally think that there's a bit too much character development for Zoya, and I'll get into that later because it's just, I didn't particularly like the way the book ended with her specifically. But all the other characters had a really great send off at the end of this book. So now I want to go into a bit of spoilery zone because I want to talk a bit more in detail about this book. This book answered a lot of the questions, or all of the questions that the other book had left us with towards the beginning. So we found out what was up with Nikolai's demon, what was up with the Darkling, what was up with the marriage with the Princess Aerie, and a lot of that was tied together really well. I wasn't expecting it to go the way it did, which was a huge surprise. Like the way Nikolai spun that whole wedding thing to be between Genya and David, which was so sweet and so heartbreaking. When David died, I almost cried because I really loved David. I think I'm glad I didn't bring him back to life because it made his death more meaningful, and it's good story writing when you have a war going on and someone dies. Like, someone has to die. I'm sad it was David. I really am, because that's so messed up for Genya, but yeah, it was good story writing, and I have to admit that. I was also really surprised as to how she incorporated the Darkling into this story. I thought he was going to play a much bigger role, but no, it was just him in the background essentially the whole time. And I'm glad that we got to read some of the chapters from his perspective, because we've never really had that. We only ever had like a chapter at the end of one of the books about him specifically in his past. So we got to see a bit about his past there. But we never really got to read inside a book his perspective of the things that were happening. So I really appreciated that, getting to know a bit more of the Darkling and his inner thoughts and his motivations. I really liked that. But he didn't really do much in the book other than just be there and characters be angry at him. I felt like his presence there was more meant for the characters to move on and to accept what happened and to just like leave that bit of their lives behind them and just move on from that. I think that was his main purpose in this book. I'm also confused with how it ended, how Zoya and Alina and Genya all decided that they were going to find someone to replace him to hold the making at the heart of the world together. I'm confused because he's immortal, so I don't understand how they're going to fix that. I don't know, they didn't go into very much detail. But also I felt like that's fitting punishment for him. He did so many horrible things. Why would you feel guilty about leaving him there? Like, I mentioned earlier how I wasn't necessarily happy with Zoya's arc. I don't think she should have been queen of Ravka. I didn't think that was like a good ending for her. There's so many problematic things with Zoya being queen. First of all, she's an incredibly powerful Grisha, which means she can live for hundreds of years. I don't think it's sane for a country to have a queen for 100 years. Like, there's a reason, like, there needs to be growth and development, and people need to make mistakes. Like, it's just too much, too long time to have power. And all of that power corrupts, as we've seen with the Darkling. And Zoya was already having some issues about herself being so powerful towards the end, and she was feeling guilty about that, and that was like the whole thing that she was talking about, the Darkling and her nightmares. But it's just not great. Another thing is, The fact that Zoya becomes queen really demoted Nikolai, and I didn't like that because I felt he deserved so much more. He should have kept his crown. I really am insistent on that because he was such a good king, and I see no reason why he should have been demoted to prince consort. Like, what? No! No! He worked so hard for that. For that title, for Ravka, he deserved to be king, and Zoya his queen. Not Zoya the queen and then Nikolai prince consort. That puts him at such different levels of authority. If she were to be his queen, they would have been like equal partners. That's what I wanted. The other thing I said in my other video about King of Scars is that she's too powerful. I was really expecting at the end of that book that they would make her some sort of teacher or someone like kind of like Bagra, where she would change the way that Grisha were taught and like how they use their magic. But I guess the way that Leigh Bardugo went with this is that Zoya kind of keeps all that power to herself, and she's still trying to learn how to use and master her new abilities. So I guess she's not teaching, or she's not handing down the knowledge that she's learned about how to use the powers that Grisha are granted, like properly. Which kind of surprised me because that was another thing. I wasn't expecting the arc to lead her to more power at the end. I was expecting her to like feel at ease with herself and just relax at the end. But it's fine. The way it ended is fine. I have a couple issues with it, but overall it was very exciting to read. Nina and Hannah's arc was the best one. Nina and Hannah were my favorite characters in this book. Or more, Nina was my favorite character in this book. And she's just amazing. Her spy work is fantastic. And then her relationship with Hannah is so strong and so independent. The two of them working together and plotting together and scheming together. And then Hannah coming to the realization that she feels way more comfortable as a boy, and then her acceptance of that, and then the ending of how she deals with Prince Rasmus and takes his body essentially. Kind of creepy, but kind of cool at the same time, and I'm so excited for like the possibilities that that can bring in the future. The possibilities of peace now that there's two Grisha that have embedded themselves in the royal family of Fjerda. That was such an amazing arc. The two of them totally deserved that, and I'm so glad it worked that way. Also, the absolute best part about this book is that we got to see the crows again. Like, oh my god, thank you. I was so happy to see them. I remember just hoping, whilst I was reading this book, hoping that we could see them one last time before this whole world just ended. And thank God that we did, because Kaz, Jasper, Wylan, all of that was so fun to read. Being back in Ketterdam and seeing it from like Zoya and Nikolai's perspective was so much fun. And then we get to see Inej at the end, very briefly and kind of forcefully, but still we get to see her again. And then they mentioned that Nina and Inej go off talking, which I'm so glad that they reconnected one last time. And it was so good to see them again. Oh, and Alina as well. Alina and Mal came back for a little bit. We got to see Alina more. I remember thinking that they were obsessing too much about Alina in King of Scars, and they did still obsess about her at the beginning of Rule of Wolves, but then they went to go meet with her in person, and then after that they kind of stopped obsessing about Alina. Like, yeah, of course they were going to meet her. She's very important. And that's one of the things that annoyed me about the first book, is that they kept on talking about Alina as if she were dead, as if they were never going to see her again. But no, she's still alive, and they saw her twice. So that's just, I thought that was really good. I really like Alina as well. Okay, so my overall rating of this book was 4 out of 5. I know 4 out of 5, I've been talking so like high, praising this book so much, but there was just, again, the whole thing with Nikolai and Zoya really threw me off. So I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars just because of that. I just don't think that they're right for each other. And the ending could have used a little bit of tweaking. But overall, I was so satisfied with this book as a conclusion to the series. I liked it so much better than King of Scars, and I think it's like up there in the same levels as the first trilogy, the Shadow and Bone trilogy. It's up there with that series. And like everything pays off so beautifully, and it's a great ending to a great world. And I hope that one day in the future we'll get to see more of this world. But I think for now, this is the perfect ending, and I don't want Leigh Bardugo to just rush into this again with another book without seriously considering what is going to add to this world, because this book ended so beautifully, and I can't imagine it going any other way. So yeah, I highly recommend reading this book. It's so exciting, so amazing, such a very good payoff. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, leave a like and subscribe.